Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Live and Give show. We have a special episode today. So, if you're wondering what is going on with our outfits, it is the Lunar New Year. So, happy Lunar New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year's. And so, traditionally, we have red envelopes filled with lucky money. So, this is your lucky envelope for the year, and this is yours. So, my name is Huang Nguyen. I have with me my lover, Jaime Gonzalez and Maria Coleman. So
Hello,
why don't
everyone.
you start us off today and tell everyone what we are discussing today?
Happy New Year, everyone, and especially to all my Asian homies and friends and family. And so today we are discussing failures and adversities and how you overcame them. So I think this is going to be a good show, and because we got to lay it out there.
That's
you know?
right.
So all our failures,
Right.
and how we are here now because of them. So
Right. I'm just gonna have everyone share a little bit about our outfits and kind of what the Lunar New Year and what we celebrate. And traditionally, the Lunar New Year is celebrated according to it, so it changes every year according to the calendar there. But traditionally in Vietnam, this is what we call an ao dai, which is our outfit, and we have Maria in her beautiful ao dai as well. So it's really important to set the tone for the new year, just like how we celebrate it here in America. Over there, it's actually 3 days of no work, and it's a lot of celebrating. It's prosperity, wealth, families get together, everyone cooks a feast and to share that this time of the year. But the beginning sets the tone for everything. So it's a really big celebration for us. And today is day 3. It started on Saturday. So this is the third day. So the first 3 days are really the most critical days for the Lunar New Year for us. But I'm super excited about our topic today for failures and adversities, because on episode 1, we said, wouldn't it be awesome instead of just talking about the successes that we actually discuss the failures, the adversities, and overcoming some of those. So really, really happy. What would you like to share about that, Maria? Start us off.
So I love that you came to me first, because I was thinking about the topic over the weekend, and I was thinking about mindset. And mindset is something that you're going to hear a lot about as we progress in our episodes in the Live and Give show. But the reason I wanted to bring mindset to the table is because it sounds a little bit like an elusive term. But I think mindset plays a big, big role in how you come out of those failures. And ultimately, as Jaime says, how it kind of leads you to where you are today. So that's the first thing that I wanted to add. In other words, what role do you feel mindset plays when you're A, going through a failure, or B, coming out of one?
Right.
and well, I think kind of going back, and for me, whenever if we can kind of get into some of the failures. I think whenever you're young, you don't have any, say, personal development. You don't have any mindset development. And so I think, early on, I think it's very difficult, especially,
Point.
nowadays for children, because there are so many more options compared to whenever we were growing up, right? And a lot of those options are actually not good options right now. And everything is at the tip of their hands, tip of their fingers. They can access anything. And that wasn't the case whenever we were around.
Right.
And so it's a little bit more difficult for the younger population. But now, since they have access to it, on your phone, I think we just need to educate the kids that it is accessible to start looking at some of those platforms that we are now, for the past, 10 years or so, we're learning about it.
Can you
You know?
share 3 specifically that maybe anybody who's watching, who's going through some hard times, who wants to have some of these platforms that are easily accessible? What are some? I know there's a lot of them, but could you share, like, say, 3 of them that people can start following?
And I think one of my favorites is just mainly YouTube. I listen a lot to Les Brown. So he's probably one of my favorites because he has a lot of energy, but he's very, very positive. And he's hungry. I'm hungry. So, and that's what he talks about, being hungry for life, being hungry to grow, being hungry to self-develop and educate yourself. But he talks a lot about how you can, not know a lot of things initially, but so quickly by just listening to him, you can learn so fast. I think he's probably one of my favorites right now. And of course, Jim Rohn is one of my favorites. And even though he's not with us anymore, I mean, there's still a lot of great YouTube videos from him. We've gone to a lot of Tony Robbins seminars. So,
Right.
and, one or two might be one of my favorites, but, we've taken them all, so, and if anyone has, I can recommend specifically why I liked a particular seminar. But yeah, he has a lot of great content. What do you usually like and listen to for these mindset, goals and development?
I do the same. I really love listening to Les Brown. I also have Brandon Burchard. He has a Growth Day app, which is a really low cost, but in addition to just motivation and inspiration, the other thing I really find helpful is journaling. And within the Growth Day app, you can actually journal within there, or you can physically, like I literally have a little red notebook that and I've journaled. I started journaling by the age of 10. So at a very young age, I started implementing what's on my mind and my emotions through good times and through hard times. And those are something that I found as a strategy to really help. Back then, I didn't have the internet. I didn't have a phone nor a computer to have access to these self-developmental resources. But I think, YouTube has a plethora. I listen to a good amount of, besides Les Brown, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, those have been our big three. Podcasts are also very, very good. Jay Shetty has one on purpose. Lewis Howes has one that he interviews and brings a lot of guests in. And one of the commonalities that you'll hear of some of the most successful people is they discuss about failures and adversities. And like Maria said on last week's episode, she said, we fail or we learn, right? We don't actually learn. You said what?
Well, that's not my quote.
It was,
But yes,
Yeah, so right.
you either win or you learn.
You win or you learn, not fail. So the failure, how quote unquote failure, is something that you always will learn something. But when you're in the midst of learning, this past weekend I was just listening in someone who was a really big speaker. You guys might have known Eric Thomas, but he talks about failure. And so the problem with failure is some people keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, and doing like constantly thinking, well, why can't I get out of the hole? And the thing with failure or adversities is you have to stop and figure out, why are we failing? Why is it not going in the direction? And what do I need to do in order to pivot and change my strategy? And so there is a curveball of getting out of the hole of, you can't just continue failing and continue doing it. You actually have to stop, reflect, and see what are some adaptation and skill sets and people that you need to surround yourself with in order to change the direction of what's happening, right? So I think that's a really big one that I really enjoyed. What about you, Maria? What do you do when there's adversity or your past failures that have kind of helped your journey?
No, I love that you mentioned journaling. I know that journaling is something that I have traditionally struggled with, and not necessarily because of the modality itself, but more so just because I don't feel comfortable sharing my thoughts on paper that someone could potentially read, right? But I do think that it's very beneficial. I think learning from others by way of a podcast or by way of an audio book is helpful. Earlier, I mentioned the topic of mindset, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because as I mentioned, mindset is kind of an elusive word, but the idea is that while you may not know what mindset is or how to fix your mindset, it's by watching others or listening to others or understanding how they might traverse a particular obstacle that then you learn vicariously. And so I love the topic of journaling. I have used some, for example, the 5-minute journal from Intelligent Change. I love that because it's quick and it's simple and you don't have to put too much out there in case someone were to read it. But at the same time, it's something that gets you to be introspective, talking about what happened that day or what you are hoping to accomplish in the future. Another thing when it comes to failures is that sometimes we don't really know what the lesson is going to be until you come out of that. And it's the difficult time is when you're in the thick of it.
Right.
But if you change your physiology, then you can change your psychology. So maybe going for a walk in nature, for example, or doing a workout. And sometimes that's the last thing you want to do. I understand that. But it is amazing how just going for a walk can change your perspective.
Yeah, I think health is key. Whenever someone is, say, not healthy, I'm just going to throw out, because I see a lot of patients with diabetes and high blood pressure, a lot of autoimmune disorders. It is very difficult for them to sit down and actually try to calm themselves down because there is so much inflammation in their body, and it's a fight or flight mechanism already. So I think you're on the right track for me. And if you are not healthy per se, it is very difficult to have a great mindset, right? So I don't see a lot of people that are very unhealthy with a great mindset. I don't know a lot of people that actually have that. So knowing, how to be healthy, and we'll talk about this, very, very in depth and, probably in a couple episodes. But if you're not healthy within you, and your brain is part of your whole body, right? So if you have inflammation in your body, you're going to have inflammation in your brain, and it's going to send out these stress hormones, that are going to, put you not at a very good position. You're going to react a lot sooner. You're not going to be able to, handle a certain situation properly. And you just have to calm yourself down, but you can't because there's so much going on in your body, and that you really need other help besides just, what we're talking about, like, audiobooks and, mentors and things like that. It's mainly has to come within you, really within you, that health aspect of it. But we'll dive into, later on down the road, about how we can actually calm our mind down.
Why don't we do it today? Let's talk on this episode. Let's make that the focal point of today's talk instead of jumping. Because I think that's the key.
Well, because I do have a whole, list of things that I do want to cover, and I'm not prepared today to actually do that. So I want to make sure this is well covered in an episode that we can just talk about, 45 minutes, and I can just go down a list and say, hey, this is for this. This is what I do for this. And I think, probably in the next couple episodes, I would be able to do that.
Yeah, we can do high level at least. Yeah, we'll do an episode specifically designated for health and mindset and like inner things. But I think some of the strategies, because at the midst of, and I'm pretty sure people who are listening in who are like, well, right now, what can I do right now that can get me out? Because this is stressful times, right? We all go through stressful times and struggles, whether it's a failure or adversity or challenge within our own self with ourself, right? Or our significant other, or something at work, or a colleague, or there's a whole plethora of things. But, you touch upon something that's very important, which is your inner calm, your inner peace. And I think on a high level, some of the things that, especially through our own growth journey, gratitude practice has been something that I find has been really helpful because it gives you perspective, right? And so going to help one other person, if you just made your focus, even on the day that you feel absolutely like you don't want to get out of bed, you feel like everything is a domino effect falling and spiraling downwards. If you can shift your energy and focus on how can I help just even not a whole bunch, one other individual, it will definitely shift the energy and your focus off of the situation where you're at. I don't know if that helps other people, but I know that's definitely helped me and a lot. And then being able to, when you do the gratitude practice, like for me, it doesn't have to be long. Even if it's the start of your day or the end of the day, reflecting back what you're truly grateful for. And it doesn't have to be anything grand. What I find is if you focus on small daily wins, like even if it was like, okay, today I got up. Today I did a 5-minute walk. Today I, did my breathing for 2 minutes. Today I made a phone call and picked up the phone and checked up on family members or friends. Like it doesn't have to be anything grand, but celebrate those small wins. And I think if you focus on those small wins, it starts stacking. Just like when you start focusing on negative things, that starts stacking. But if you can just do small daily celebrations, I think that's one of the strategies that I find is really helpful.
And for those of you that tuned in to listen to our failures and adversities, we are working our way there. Now, remember, the purpose, or one of the purposes of the Live and Give show, is for us to share with you strategies and based on our experience, something that has worked for us. And so we don't want to just lay down all the failures without telling you that there's hope on the other side. And part of that comes in the form of various modalities. We talked about journaling. We've talked about calming yourself. It could be a source of meditation, for example, going on walks. And also just treating your body with respect and having that sense of gratitude. For those of you that are going through a challenge, our heart goes out to you right now because we know that, as Dr. Hua mentioned, times are hard. But the fact that you are here, that is one of those things that you can celebrate. So let's go ahead and dive into some of those failures. Do we have any volunteers?
Do you want to
Who
share?
wants to put themselves on display?
And I think for me, it was probably, I had graduated college, and my college life was pretty easy. I would just, study for an all-nighter and I would get all A's, right? So, and I mean, all the other times, I would either go out or play sports, which I played throughout since childhood. So I didn't really have to try as hard in college. And then I graduated towards the top of my class. But then after college, whenever I was in optometry school to become an eye doctor, I kept that same routine, right? So actually I exponentially made it a little bit more. So I would go out 6 days a week. 6 days a week. I would rest for 1 day. And then I probably did that for maybe 2.5 months or so. And then you're taking, the first year, what was it, like 23 hours or so. So there are a lot of classes that you have to take. In college, you're taking 15, 17 hours, but once you get, to that, professional career school, then you take so much and everything's so stacked. And my thinking was still the same, So I think probably out of all my tests, I don't know how many classes there were, probably, 7 classes. I failed half of them. And not just, 60s, but, a couple of them, it was like 30s.
Mm.
And I was like, oh crap, this is not going to work. And so I think, kind of looking back, I was like, well, let me keep on going a little bit further. So then you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I have to do? What do I have to get to kind of pass these classes, right? So come to realize it was very, very difficult. Once I got my test scores back and kind of sitting down, and I started getting anxiety at that point in time, and that's where it first started for me, and even through COVID, I was getting the anxiety because we were not going out at all. I think we stayed indoors because there were so many bad things on the news, which I shouldn't have been watching the news, like 6 weeks indoors without going out, right? And that became a toll. And then trying to pay, all our employees, which they were not working, but we were still trying to pay everyone. So that was taking a toll. So more anxiety set in. But, going back then where my test scores were really bad, I pretty much passed all my classes except one. And so that was my first time ever, first of all, failing tests. That was my first time. But then not passing the course, that really, really set me back. And I was, depressed. And so I didn't want to tell anyone, right? So I was very, very ashamed about what happened and what I was going to do. But, I am so glad, that happened, because my going forward, I was a lot more organized. I was not going out 6 days a week, maybe once a week, if that, but I was getting burnt out already, of going out. So that's actually a good thing that pretty much, stopped. But my discipline from then on, it was fantastic, so people would ask, hey, let's go out. I was like, no, I cannot, go out. I have to be, at home studying, because I knew what would happen. I would not be able to, pass school, and, if I continue to do that, for sure. But I took myself for granted, and I took, everything that I had learned for granted, back then. But, that was probably one of my biggest, failures, but, at the other side, and it was my biggest blessing, because now I'm the person that I am because of that. So, and as you know, I'm a little bit more organized,
A lot more organized
compared to, most people. But, I just kind of live by that. And I remember that time, so, and I'm just happy for it, so and then we talked about the mindset part of it. I just can't be here and just think about, oh my God, that was the worst time ever, so no, that's the best time ever for me, because that made me who I am as a person right now at this point in time.
Right. And that, when we talk about pivotal moments, right? Everyone has pivotal moments that kind of can drastically change the trajectory of the course of your life. And, I am blessed that happened, because that's how we met,
Yep.
And I think it all happened for a reason. And so, but becoming more disciplined and organized. When I first met Jaime and saw his class notes, OMG, I had never seen somebody with such color coordinated, nicely organized notes. And I'm like, hey, can I borrow those?
Color copy, please. She asked me for a color copy.
So optometry school, we graduated in 2006. And so this goes way back, but those pivotal times, we talk about academia, there's a high level of stress, and I resonate so much with that because I'm on the same boat, but my trajectory, I've always been like, school was my thing. I wasn't good in sports. I didn't have any creative juices. I really didn't I felt like the one thing that I felt I was good at was academia. And that's what I became known for. I was very focused. Can you guys believe that from kindergarten to 12th grade, I had perfect attendance? I had never missed school and never made a B. I was an A student, never made a B, but I was such a perfectionist. And I graduated top of my class. I was valedictorian. But you know, the downside of having so much pressure on yourself is that I had no grace for myself. And so when you are so hard on yourself as like always got to be the best, got to be the best, got to be the best. And I failed to see that when I went to optometry school and it was my first time ever failing, it was really hard for me because I had never experienced failure up to that point. And so it was a really hard, like, slap of reality for me. But it did, that pivotal year gave me a lot of reflection of, okay, well, it was out of my control, but instead of focusing on this point, the thing is, I still have an opportunity to continue and better myself. And, you know, people at the end of the day, when you're practicing, like we have two of really successful, we're very blessed to have two really successful eye care practices here, and we love our patients. I saw one of our patients the other day. We've been practicing for 18 years. I saw him when he was a little boy. 18 years ago, he's been following me at every practice that I've ever been to. So every year I see him, I reflect back and I'm like, you know, the time when I thought, oh my God, I failed in optometry school, you know, but the truth is we're so passionate with our patients. We're so passionate in our practice and what we build that no one's going to really care that you failed a class, right? In the reality of real life, no one's going to be like, well, what grade? What was your GPA in school? As a doctor, patients come and continue to come and have loyalty because of the care you provide, right? Not because, well, what was your GPA? It does not matter what your GPA was and that you failed. But the important thing was to learn the lesson, to continue on. And we're better people and better doctors because of that, you know? And so I think that was a blessing. But it is one of those things that when you are such an overachiever and you don't give yourself grace, it can be that's where overburn comes. And it's hard to want to share that with people because people have a perception of you like, oh no, you're valedictorian. You're always good at school. You're always in that. And I felt shame for the longest time. And now we share this vulnerability of that was part of our growth journey. And that was a pivotal moment for us to improve and why we are the way we are now, right? So, you know, so don't get discouraged if you, and we all experience it. But Maria, why don't you share a specific one of your stories?
I will. And for those of you that are thinking that you don't have any failures, that's awesome. However, I would just encourage you to try a little more. Over the weekend, I was worried that I didn't have any failures. And I thought, well, what have I done in my life if I haven't failed? But you dig deep enough and you will find some failures. So let me take you guys through a small journey. In my college years, I ended up homeless. And that was due to a failure of my own. It was due to a failure of not paying attention to when things were due. In my situation, it was financial aid. So I needed to file a financial aid application so that the government had enough time to determine whether or not I would qualify and ultimately pay for the on-campus apartment that I was staying in. So I would get these notices that it wasn't here. And I thought, you know, the school's all connected. They'll figure it out. They'll know that my financial aid is in the process of being handled and they'll just let me live here. Well, no, they won't. It's ironic that now we are in the apartment business and I got kicked out of one of my own. So in my situation, what happened was one day I came home and there was an eviction notice on my door. And thank God that it was a fully furnished apartment. So that meant that I literally just had to walk out with the bags of clothes that I brought to college. Now, on the flip side, I didn't have anywhere to go. I was homeless for about 3 weeks, living around with people. I would just stay in the dorms with some of my friends that had come from the school that I graduated from. And then I couldn't go home because my car wasn't reliable enough to make the hour-long trip south and the hour-long trip back. So I would take advantage of the fact that I had a gym. It was an aerobics class in the morning, and I would do aerobics and I would shower there. So it was challenging. And I remember thinking that I was such a failure. I was embarrassed. We talked about shame. But it's so important to think that those things do not define you. It is what meaning you assign to them that define you. And I think that that was a very early lesson in my mindset. Interestingly enough, I remember talking to my mom, who is one of my biggest role models and heroes. And she said, now just think about this for a second. Be grateful that you don't have a child on your hip that you're having to struggle with. And I thought, Mom, wait a minute. I'm living out of my car. I've got stuff stacked to the gills, looking like a little hoarder in college. I was, of course, embarrassed that anybody would find out. And I just didn't know what to do. And here my mom was saying, but look, be grateful that.
Right.
And it was just one of those mind shifts. And my mom would always use this term, and she'd say, change the channel. And that to me meant find something else to be grateful for, find something else to look on the bright side. So that definitely taught me to be more dutiful when it comes to filing applications and filling out things and making sure that I could be responsible for myself, despite the fact that I was a young 19-year-old.
Wow.
So all of them have been about school. How about in life and outside of school?
Relationship is a hard one.
Yep.
Mhm.
Relationships is, the personal side, because our emotions, people that we, that's a very personal one, right? When you're dealing with love and connection and feeling like that's failed, right? But again, that was another example for me. Like I didn't really have a healthy relationship that I could see as love growing up. I love my dad and my mom to death, but I mean, they've always been in survival mode. I mean, after, that we're wearing now my Lunar New Year outfit.
Happy New Year.
But my dad and my mom, they fled Vietnam after the war. And my mom was pregnant with me, right? So I think about their journey and just trying to survive, fleeing a country, going to place, country to country, trying to find freedom and opportunities. But because they were young and then having 3 kids and trying to find work, I mean, all I ever saw them do is work 80 to 100 hours and financial struggles. And so I never really saw a loving side and a healthy relationship in my parents, right? It was always about work and if financial stresses. That was always what I saw. And then when my dad passed away, again, I didn't see healthy relationship with my mom. She got into some very unhealthy relationships. And so my perception of love and relationship, I had a hard time trusting. But, so when I had my relationship I felt like, well, it was my boyfriend. And then after we were just not on the same page, but I stayed in the relationship because I didn't want to be a failure. I wanted to do everything possible to make it work. And I'm like, well, what if I can just do this, then he'll be happy. If I can just do this, then we'll be happy. If he changes this, then, we can make it work. And after 4 years, I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen, but you don't want to be a failure. But I did that not once, but twice. But that was a blessing because those relationships, I saw a lot of, I've learned through those relationships, but there were bad things in those relationships that now I know, what is it that I want? What do I really want in my significant other, my soulmate? And I had to raise my standards. And what I realized growing up was I just wanted love. And I took love anywhere that it came. And it was not a healthy form. And so when I started my own journey of loving myself more and raising my own standards of what I wanted in a man, I manifested Jaime. I always joke about it. He doesn't know it, but I manifested him into reality. It's because you're like, what do you really want?
Come on.
I wanted a good boy.
That was disciplined and organized.
Had color-coded notes.
This man, I couldn't have dreamed up a better man, but one of the things, even though we're so different, and I was one of those really shy people, he always was one who just did it for inspiration. Like he would motivate me, even though it would take me 10, 20 steps longer to ever get there. It would at least open my heart and mind to be open to that. He didn't tell me you need to do anything or you need to do this. He just kind of planted seeds along the way and led by example. And I respected that. And till this day, even though we've been together for 19 years now, there's still layers of me that he discovers. Like for 2 years, I didn't even tell him I knew how to cook. But I was like, I didn't want to be the submissive that everybody expected out of an Asian woman, that my mom was like, you're a woman, you need to do this. And I was like, well, no, I refuse to believe that, And so I was like, I don't know how to cook, and he would cook, right? But
Hold on. Well, I did not know how to cook for real. So back whenever we were in Houston, it was like, man, I'm calling my mom like every weekend. Like, hey, can you teach me how to cook by phone? It wasn't by video back then. It's like, hey, can you tell me how to cook this and this and this? And you knew how to. She's a great, awesome cook. Her mom is too, and my nanny.
But I wanted him to love me for me, not because of what I did per se, right? So he knew this was a time I had broken up with my boyfriend. I failed optometry school. I was in the darkest time. I'm trying to get myself together. All I would do is go bowl because I was good at that, at least. So I focused my energy on what I was good at, which was bowling at the time. And he was like, hey, where does Hua go most of the time? She comes to class. I was studying on my own, right? And he found out that's what we wound up connecting through was bowling. But, I manifested this relationship, and I talk about failures in relationship because over time, as I started learning to love myself more, I raised the standards on the people I was dating and what I expected and how I was to be treated. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times in relationships that can be difficult if you're repetitive. It's like same thing, same man, different face. But it's because you attract what the energy you put out and what you accept. If your standard is low, you're going to attract low men. If your standards are higher and you have to do the inner work first, right? And we continue doing, and I continue doing my inner work. But I knew within a month of meeting Jaime that this was going to be my soulmate and this was the man I was going to marry. I kid you not, guys.
No, you can ask, David, my friend, my best friend, actually, since elementary school. And he was living in Houston at that time. And after the second time, I was like, no, I think she's going to be the one. and he's like, oh, wow, and we were cheering I was still going out.
Still going out.
But not very much, so.
One day a week instead of 6.
Yes, exactly.
Now, do you guys find it interesting how we've covered a few topics? We've covered the topic of shame, the topic of anxiety, the topic of self-worth and validation, and how sometimes we look for those things outside of us. And I wonder how much of that contributes to us going down a path that we know very well isn't the path that we should go. And ultimately, it ends in something of a failure. Mm-hmm. It could be a failure that we feel internally, for example, that shame, or a failure that is external and visible to others. How much do you think, what role do you think the way that we think of ourselves plays in how successful or how much we fail?
I mean, I think it has a lot to do with that, so how much are we worth, to ourselves, right? Do we matter, and are we important? Do we want to grow, right? So, but I think, just the mindset of what you think of yourself, that has a lot to do with it, right? So, but again, if growing up, right? So if you're told, if you're not given love, right, and if you're told, you're not worth anything, and if you're punished or abused and things like that, how much are you going to think of yourself? So it's like you're worth nothing,
Mhm.
right? So that's very, very difficult, and that's why I think there's a lot more problems with those type of people kind of growing up, a lot more difficult times with them, because they've been told this by many people or by society or whoever it is, right? So, but yeah, it's just, I think, a lot to do with it.
No, I completely agree. The inner self-worth is such a big pivotal part of that and who you attract. On the topic of love again, as I was sharing, even if you're past and growing up, like my mom, I always knew internally, like, of course, my mom and dad truly love me. She's my everything, right? But being a single mom, and traditionally, I had to understand, as I grew up older now, I understand that it's a cultural and generational thing, that no one in our family hugged, no one in our family kissed, no one ever praised. And I craved that. I craved a hug. I craved a compliment. But it was always like, it was always like, it wasn't, I always felt like everything I did wasn't good enough. I would be the best at everything. And I felt like I still wasn't good enough. And until I made the decision that I am good enough, that I know my own worth, that those words could no longer have as much impact. And it's hard when it comes from the people you love the most, but it's not intentional, right? And so I have to understand it's a cultural gap. But what I realized through our own journey is that after I met Jaime and his family, they're all huggers and kissers, right? And so when I first met them, it was weird for me, right? Because I was not a big hugger back then. And then for his family, and everybody's like, oh, come here, mija. And like everyone's hugging and kissing. And I'm like, oh, MG. And then I was like, my mom's going to meet the family. And I was like, I don't know how she's going to respond to that. But of course, Jaime, and I tell him, and he's like, it's okay. And so every time he sees my mom, he's hugging her. And like we do a Asian kiss, which is like a sniff, it's like this, right? That's the Asian kiss. It's like a sniff almost. But then my mom started seeing how we interact, and she started changing and being more open and affectionate and hugging. And like now she verbally compliments and verbally says how proud and everything. And, even though it's like, well, the inner peace will come where you don't need that validation. The true core is that inner child in me wanted that inner child. And the first time I actually ever heard my mom say it was at our nighting.
Very recently.
I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, wow. But then,
that was last year.
That was last year. I'm 45 years old. And I was like, I know she's like, it's like you tell yourself the story. Well, I know she loves me. I know she's super proud of me. But some part of you craves that. Like, I just want to hear it,
Yeah, it's, you told me in the past, she was never shown that love.
No, she's never been shown that love.
And by her family or her parents or anything like that. But whenever she was around us, I can feel the resistance, whenever I would go hug her and kiss her. But I didn't really care, right? So it's like, you're part of my family, I'm not only doing it for her, I'm doing it for me. It's like, I'm not going to really change my love, for this particular person because, she has never learned how to show that affection, right? And I already knew that. And, a lot of our friends, Asian friends,
right?
They're just the same way, and some of them are our age.
Oh, I know.
So, but it's just kind of breaking through. You have to, if you're a very loving person, and the other person's not, I would still, try as much as you can to show them that love and affection and passion and hug them, because whenever I go up for a hug and then they let go real quick, I don't let go. It's like, no, you're gonna, yeah, you're gonna remember me. It's like, I'm not gonna let go. I'm gonna continue hugging you for 1 or 2 more seconds, and then next time that usually changes. Usually they hug for a little bit longer, so you're kind of breaking through a little bit, so. But yeah, I understand, completely. And it's tough, because if a person has never been shown love, I mean, how can they show love to another person? Right? It's difficult for them. And a lot of it is just, like we've been talking about, mindset and breaking that adversity, and that being uncomfortable feeling.
But the beauty of the story is that we don't have to continue that, regardless if it's generation or generation. You can be the change. You can be the one to break the chain and create that change, whether it's for love, whatever you want to change and you want to see because you didn't experience that as a child. Know that it can stop with you and that you can make that change, whether it's in love, in finances, in health. All of that doesn't have to keep continuing on just because that's how our parents passed it on. Like, I was determined to change, that I was going to be the one to change the love patterns. Like with Athena, we're very super affectionate with her, right? Everything that we didn't have growing up, I wanted to make sure that we implement that change with her, right? Finances, whatever it was that we were struggling with, I wanted our generation to be different. Whatever it was with health, same thing. It's like, oh no, everyone in my family has diabetes. Everyone in my family has this and that. But you can be the change, right? Mm-hmm. You can be that pivotal change. And that's why I say be the one to break that change. You can create it, right? And find ways and resources and people to help you with that journey. But that is the beauty of it, because love is one of my highest values. Love and connection is so important for me. And, when people say hurt people can inspire other people. Hurt people can change and not have to continue hurting other people. So I want to break that, if you've been hurt, that you have to continue, you're more likely to go hurt other people. Because you've been hurt, you know what that pain is. You don't want other people to feel that pain and hurt. That could be the cause and the reason to have the passion to want to change so other people don't experience that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think you can utilize that in a positive way, right? And whatever you're going through, but that when you talk about the self-worth, everything stems from that. What you allow and attract into your life is based on your own self-worth. And that's a continual journey that you do, right? And when we talk about these self-development and motivation and gratitude and all these different things, that's all part of building up your own self-worth and self-confidence and self-love. And that's so important because it trickles to everything. It trickles to everything in your life.
It's a boomerang effect at the end of the day. What you're putting out there, the person that you're presenting out into the world is essentially what you're going to give back. I think one topic that you mentioned when you were talking about manifesting Jaime, I do think that it's because you were a different person on the outside. And so as a result, you were manifesting him in the qualities that you were displaying. And I want to acknowledge one of our viewers, Mylin. She's actually one of those people that we were talking about in terms of just breaking that. It doesn't have to continue. And I think the same is true. You don't have to continue having a negative mindset when something bad happens. At the end of the day, it's the meaning. Peter Crone, one of my favorite, he considers himself the mind architect. And it's just beautiful how he relays things in such a way that you can understand them so fully. But he said it's not necessarily it's the action, it's what the meaning that you assign to that, or the emotion, it's the meaning that you assign to that. And I really do think that the reason that that's important in business, we'll say, in business and in the career, is because of what Dr. Waugh just said. At the end of the day, we're still that inner child that received the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's what we're doing with it on a daily basis. Because just because we're, a little bit older doesn't necessarily mean that we have it figured out. But every day is a new opportunity for you to use those experiences, use those lessons to make a difference in not only your own life, but in the people that you're impacting on a day-to-day basis.
I just thought of another, I guess, failure. Yeah, or adversity. So whenever we were married for 2 or 3 years, we were wanting to start a family, and so we were trying after the third year, was it? And we were trying to get pregnant, and year would go by, and we would find out, no, not pregnant. So this happened for what, 8 years, 8 or 9 years. And so we're like, I'm looking at myself like, man, you are a big failure. It's like you can't even, become a dad. You're already married for 8 or 9 years, and you can't even have a child. And that was tough for me. So we were, starting to explore like other options, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, okay, well, first let's see if there's anything else wrong with health-wise, first of all. And so we were very healthy overall. I mean, we were working out, a lot, but we were also working a lot at the same time. We were still, like we were saying on the last episode, we were grinding. We were working 60, 70 hours a week. And that was very difficult. But, while I had gone to the gynecologist, and she had these pains, monthly pains, and she would be in bed for like a week almost, in a lot of pain, like every single month. And that was very, very difficult, just to see her in bed and in pain, and just, I mean, you can't really do much, right? Because they only tell her, well, just take anti-inflammatories, or whatever you can, discontinue this, and don't do this, but she was adamant on finding out exactly what it was. And so she had gone to her gynecologist, and her gynecologist was not new. She had been practicing for a while already. And she's like, no, there's something wrong with me. I know it. And she's like, I guarantee it. There's something wrong with me. And she's like, no, everything's fine. And so she's like, I want you to go in, and I want you to make sure I don't have endometriosis, right? And so she was like, I want you to prove it to me, And so she went in, and she had severe, endometriosis. And so she was, lasering, all these, sites, and like many sites, right? And so I don't know if she even feels sorry for you or not, or if she's apologized or whatever. But 1 or 2 months later, after she had this procedure, she ended up getting pregnant. Right. So, but, looking back at it, that's the best thing ever. It's like, yeah, we could have been there getting super upset at the doctor, and, for, having Hua go through all this pain for all these years. But no, Athena's like the biggest blessing that we've ever had, So, and that's one of the reasons that we show her like so much love, just because we knew we endured a lot of difficult times, by just having, to conceive her. Right. And we tell her, hey, look, it was very difficult, but we were able to have you. And, if there are other, mothers out there that are having a difficult time, it's like, you have to, a lot of the times, being doctors, right? And most of the time we don't like being questioned, right? But sometimes you have to have either a second opinion or they
Mhm.
have to have some sort of proof that you're actually doing the right thing, right? Because you can't go life without just
Right. You know,
difficult time.
and one of the things that she resisted a lot, because I kept doing all the research, and I said, you know, I truly 100% believe I have endometriosis. And you cannot just do a scan externally and diagnose endometriosis. You have to go in and do a laparoscop, yeah, procedure on me. And she said, well, your insurance is not going to cover it. I was like, oh my gosh, I am not worried about my insurance. I will pay out of pocket for it. But like you said, you know, going in to prove it. But because it was such a hard time for us to have a child, I think had we just had a child, you know, sometimes we can take our children for granted. But the fact that because it was such a journey for us to become parents, and when I met Jaime, you know, we joke about it, but I said, how many kids would you like? He said he wanted 5 kids right off the bat when we were first dating. And so
That's like a Mexican household. You know, that's
So
pretty
you-
much where we grew up. I mean, my parents, like my mom, she has like
so you
20
could
28.
Yeah.
so you could only
To the teens.
imagine the emotional turmoil as a woman to be his wife and not be able to have a child, right? And the stress that induced. And so I found out Christmas Eve. We were with his family. Traditionally, we do Christmas Eves. We do tamales. We cook, and we open up Christmas presents. And I had already missed my periods, and I felt like, oh, I don't know, something's wrong, different with my body. And so I had gotten a pregnancy test that night, and I found out I was pregnant. I've never been so happy finding out that I was going to become a mom. And I hid it from him, and I put it in a little gift box. And the next morning, I made breakfast on Christmas morning. And I said, well, I made him breakfast, and I said, I have one additional gift. And he goes, we already exchanged gifts last night. I was like, it's a bonus gift. And so I remember him opening up the gift, and I had never seen Jaime cry ever in my life up to this point, right? He was always very, you know, more macho man. And I had never seen this softer side where he would cry. But when he opened up that box, oh my gosh, he cried. And like that's probably the happiest day, right? That we were going to find out that we were going to be parents. But that was a big blessing, and we didn't give up, you know. But you know, one of the things I already mentally was prepared for was like, even if we could not biologically have our own kids, like I was open and willing, and I was accepting that. If that was not in God's plan for us to have our own child, I was okay with that, you know. And the most important thing was I really loved you, and I was blessed to have you, right? But to have a child, like, and Ninja, you know, we nicknamed her Ninja, and I was like, you know, God blessed us with such a kind, loving, adventurous child. It's never a dull day. But, you know, and I was like, even if we don't have 5 kids, right? We're blessed with the one. And so we never take it for granted, like the health of our child, and just our family, and just the core things. It's like those little things that we sometimes may take for granted, we don't take for granted, right? Because it's like, man, even if we have all of these other things that we're stressing about or problems, whether it's work or, you know, other things in the market or whatever's going on, like if you just reflect back and you're like, man, I'm so blessed. I woke up today, right? That my mind is, that I'm able to breathe properly, that I have hands and feet, that I have a loving husband, I have a child, right? And just those things that we're like, we think, oh, it's always going to be there. No, right? Those are things, those are the blessings. And so I always say, look for the blessings every day. Look for the daily miracles in your life, right? And focus your energy on that. It'll pull you through, right? It will pull you through whatever you're going through. But I guarantee you, if you're watching this, you're blessed. I guarantee you.
True to form, we are wrapping up this episode with gratitude. way that we something to be grateful for. I know I tell
Everyone for joining the Live and Give show. Until the next time.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.